woke is a word used by the Black community to note that we must be aware of social injustices.
But words
And
migrate.
why is that a bad thing?
It's not a bad thing, and originally that was absolutely a great thing. Alert to injustice was not bad. But words do migrate.
At all concerned about the fact that the International Criminal Court just today issued a subpoena for Bibi Netanyahu.
Well, that's
Why does one televised debate ignite a nationwide storm? When Bill Maher, the unapologetically blunt, politically incorrect pundit, walked onto The View. It wasn't just another daytime segment, it was a seismic collision of ideology, ego, and culture. Maher didn't show up to sip tea and nod politely. He came with verbal grenades strapped to his chest, ready to challenge the hosts on everything from MAGA voters to the cult of wokeness, and challenge them he did. The moment turned into more than just a fiery exchange. It became a cultural flashpoint, a national conversation starter, and a mirror reflecting the deep fractures shaping 21st century American discourse. But what turned a morning talk show into a televised ideological brawl? It wasn't just the personalities. It was the raw exposure of how America fails to talk to itself anymore. Let's rewind to where it all exploded, because what looked like a typical sparring match was actually a pressure cooker of pent-up frustrations waiting to blow.
To me, that in the first segment you used the term woke, and you said that woke is what was sort of ruining everything. And I know that you're...
no, I didn't say ruining everything. I said that's why Trump could get reelected.
That's why Trump could get reelected. So I just, the term woke has been, in my view, co-opted by the right and weaponized and bastardized. And so I was surprised to hear you use the term, because historically, as you know, because I think you're quite brilliant, that woke is a word used by the Black community to note that we must be aware of social injustices.
But words
And so
migrate.
why is that a bad thing?
Against the backdrop of America's ever-escalating culture wars, the stage was primed for chaos. Sunny Hostin, the show's resident legal intellect and fierce progressive voice, wasn't about to let Maher's provocations go unchallenged. Throw in Joy Behar's flair for inflammatory comparisons and Whoopi Goldberg's struggle to referee the chaos, and you had a studio boiling over with ideological friction. Maher, armed with sarcasm and satire, delivered critiques like shuriken fast, sharp, and right to the nerve. But this wasn't just a debate. It was a televised microcosm of America's clashing moral compass. Then came the moment that doused the studio in gasoline. Joy Behar, never one to read the room, compared MAGA hats to swastikas, a soundbite so explosive, you could hear the collective gasp echoing across social media. Maher immediately called foul, blasting the analogy as reckless and counterproductive. While Behar framed it as a cry for accountability, Maher saw a dangerous, alienating overreach. The internet, predictably, erupted.
I mean, it's just astounding to me that they can't tell the good guys from the bad guys. I mean, just morally. I mean, let me tell you, if you're for Hamas, just live in Gaza for a day. And I'm not talking about while the war is on. I mean, before the war. Trust me, you would go running and screaming and begging to live in Tel Aviv, a place that has your value.
Voice, Sunny Hostin, unfazed and resolute, backed Behar and doubled down on her belief that Trump supporters must be held responsible. To her, it was a question of moral clarity. But Maher flipped the script. He argued that the left's sweeping generalizations aren't just wrong, they're suicidal. In his view, painting millions of voters with a single brushstroke does nothing but entrench resentment and cement division. The air in the studio turned dense, and even the audience, normally a chorus of affirmations, sat in uncertain silence. This wasn't just about Trump anymore. It was about how America speaks across divides, or more accurately, how it fails to. Then came the spark word, woke. Suddenly, the discussion hit warp speed. Hostin defended the term, tracing it back to Black communities and its original meaning of being alert to social injustice. Maher, however, called that framing a baton switch. To him, woke had morphed into a weaponized, sanctimonious, exclusionary doctrine that punishes dissent and prioritizes aesthetics over substance. The word, he claimed, no longer enlightens. It isolates.
Don't tell me that the left hasn't changed. I mean, I'm old enough to remember when it was the conservatives who hated the Jews.
Yeah.
Okay? That was a joke. But,
Too dark, too dark.
Well, maybe it is, but it's true. I mean, you know, if I had any doubt that I was right about the change that's happened in the left, watching people protest for a terrorist organization like Hamas, That straightened me up.
Hostin argued that staying alert to injustice is not a weakness but a moral duty. Maher didn't disagree, at least not in theory, but he issued a warning: when the left prioritizes ideological purity and rigid speech codes, it plays right into Trump's hands. In his view, the obsession with progressive orthodoxy alienates regular Americans who feel talked down to, not talked with. The segment then veered into another ideological landmine: Trump voters. Joy Behar unleashed again, calling them morally complicit. Maher recoiled at the blanket condemnation, defending Trump supporters not as saints but as humans often motivated by economic anxiety, disillusionment, or feelings of cultural abandonment. Reducing them all to bigots, he argued, isn't just wrong, it's lazy. It's also political malpractice. Hostin stood her ground, while co-host Sarah N. tried to inject nuance, suggesting maybe the left should try understanding the motivations behind Trump's base instead of moralizing them out of existence. Maher's central critique landed like a thunderclap. The left isn't losing the culture war because of Trump. It's losing because it's lost touch with the everyday American.next.
Women have no, this is a show watched by a lot of women. Women have no rights in this place, and a lot of majority Muslim countries around the world. There is no equal rights as far as speech, dress, opportunities for education, reproductive rights, freedom from sexual violence, freedom from sexual harassment.
The LGBTQ. Yes.
That too. But you throw around the term apartheid. There is a gender apartheid in a lot of the world, where women are second-class citizens, at best.
Just when you thought it couldn't get hotter, the conversation moved to one of the most radioactive topics of all: the Israel-Hamas conflict. Maher didn't bother with diplomatic phrasing. He called Hamas a terrorist group outright and slammed the left-wing protests he believed were dangerously close to cheerleading for extremists. For Maher, the conflict wasn't about shades of gray, it was existential. Israel, in his eyes, was fighting for survival. Hostin, clearly shaken by the shift in tone, brought the conversation back to the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. She spoke passionately about the lives lost: children, women, civilians. Maher acknowledged the tragedy but stood firm, arguing that failing to confront Hamas meant inviting more bloodshed. The studio turned from ideological skirmish to emotional battleground. The moment was raw, human, and divisive. Maher's stance triggered both applause and anger. Hostin's plea reminded viewers of the conflict's painful complexity, and just like that, the debate wasn't about Gaza, it was about how America processes moral ambiguity in a world where everyone wants easy villains and simple heroes. Next.
The question.
Yes.
You do?
Yes. So how do we get out with a ceasefire?
All right. So Hamas needs to be destroyed because they are a terrorist organization who say openly that they want to commit genocide on the Jewish people, on the state of Israel. That's what from the river to the sea means. Okay? And they say it very openly. They said, we did this attack. They've attacked Israel 5 times. They've started 5 wars since they were given that land back. They could have chosen to turn that place into any place they wanted to, and they took a lot of money that they took from the international community and they spent it on bombs and guns and building tunnels. So if they need to be destroyed, how do we do that? It's a war. I don't know how to do that, and you don't know how to do that. I assume the Israeli... Of course, everybody is, but that's what happens in a war. Here's a way to stop that. Stop attacking Israel.
Next voice but. Maher wasn't done throwing punches. The conversation turned inward again, back to what he called America's mean girls culture. According to Maher, the country is stuck in a feedback loop of digital shaming and ideological grandstanding. Cancel culture, he claimed, had stopped being about accountability, had become a sport, an inquisition, a means to punish anyone who dared question orthodoxy. He took special aim at the left, accusing it of weaponizing language and prioritizing purity tests over persuasion. What once were values have become slogans, and slogans, he said, don't fix policy or bridge divides. Policies like defund the police, in Maher's view, have done more harm than good, not because they are evil, but because they are poorly sold and easily twisted by opponents. His point was piercing. The left doesn't suffer from bad ideas as much as it suffers from bad messaging. Inside the studio, you could feel the axis shift. Even Joy Behornumly Unshakable fired back with a defensive, "How dare you?" But the applause in the room suggested Maher had touched a nerve. Many were afraid to name an
It's a term that I thought we kind of came up with because people were calling them bums and
Yes.
vagrants and hobos.
Now that's
Homeless. No.
It's unhoused.
Well, it's
now.
people
Unhoused.
experiencing
Now it's unhoused.
homelessness. But they're experiencing it on the street.
Yeah.
Okay, the liberal view of that was for compassion's sake. We're the liberals. We're compassion. Let's get these people off the street. That's not the view of the whatever word we're going to come up with for this. Their view of the homeless is they're an endangered species that needs to be protected in their natural habitat, living their best life under a bridge.
The fallout was instant and ferocious. Social media exploded, with hashtags flying like shrapnel. Some praised Maher as a truth teller willing to say what others won't. Others condemned him as out of touch, reckless, or worse, a Trojan horse for right-wing talking points. But love him or loathe him, Maher had the nation's attention. His message wasn't just a rant. It was a gauntlet thrown at the feet of the modern left. His warning that the obsession with wokeness, purity, and rhetorical superiority is alienating the very people progressives need to win over. And while he criticized the left, his critique came from a place of concern, not contempt. He wasn't rooting for Trump, he was warning about how Trump thrives. Maher argued that if the left wants to be more than a moral club for the enlightened few, it has to ditch the condescension and engage with America as it actually is. His view appearance wasn't just a performance. It was a cultural mirror, and what it reflected was a nation in desperate need of conversation, not condemnation. Whether progressives take his advice or scoff at it, one truth remains: shouting louder isn't winning anyone over. Listening might.